Hey everybody, this is the Cold War slotted notes. So if you missed our Zooms, here are the slotted note answers. You may need to pause and write down the blanks. So don't sit here just going and thinking I'm going too fast. Please pause when you come to something that you need. I'm not going to talk as much through this because we've already done some of these slides. Okay, we start with the Iron Curtain. The end of World War II, the Allies freed all of the Western European countries that had been conquered by Germany. The Allies also gave the nations money to rebuild and helped them form democratic governments before returning to their own countries. Eastern Europe. Things were different in Eastern Europe because the Soviets did not leave the countries that they had freed. The Soviet Union continued to occupy and set up communist governments in many Eastern European nations. Western Europe and America were alarmed by the Soviet advances in Eastern Europe. Many believed that the communists were trying to take over the world. There you can see Soviets. Okay. Iron Curtain. In March 1946, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill warned that an Iron Curtain of Soviet totalitarianism had fallen across Europe. It wasn't an actual curtain, guys. It's just a metaphor. Churchill meant that a dividing line now existed between the democratic countries in Western Europe and the communist countries in Eastern Europe. Again, not an actual line. The term Iron Curtain was a symbol that represented the tensions between communist and democratic countries in Europe. Here's a picture for you. You can see Germany. We have East Soviet is over here in this part of Berlin and to the east. And then you can see West Berlin over here, which was broken into the US piece, the British piece, and the French piece, because they had kind of taken over different pieces trying to make sure that Germany did not get powerful and do what they were doing before. An Iron Curtain descended across the continent. Behind that line lies the ancient capitals of Central and Eastern Europe. Winston Churchill. So you can see this dividing line here. Everything on this side of the line, the Soviets were taking over, and over here everything was democratic and not under the Soviet Union's control. You can also see all of these places had been taken by Germany, and the Soviets came in and they were trying to free them from Germany. And when they did that, they kind of took over and they didn't leave. Okay. 1945 was the year communist control of the government was gained in East Germany. And then there is the Iron Curtain. Again, it's a metaphor. You can see that he's saying, don't fence me in. And we're saying, no, we're not letting your communism come over here. All right, Eastern Bloc. The Soviets managed to set up communist governments throughout Eastern Europe. The government outlawed political parties or newspapers that opposed the communists. So anything that was against communism was pretty much like taken down or hidden, or the government was like, no, we don't want you to read that. So they would block it, those kind of things. And they started to make it so there were no political parties. It was just the leader. The Soviets jailed or killed some political opponents. They also rigged elections to ensure the success of the communists. So they had an election, and then they like they rigged it, they cheated, and that way they became powerful. And once they had been elected, they were like, yeah, I'm not giving this back. I'm in charge now. All right, the spread of communism, 1945 to 1949. You can see communism went all over here. And so we have East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, all I don't know why I can't say that today. Albania. Then the Soviet Union is all this up here. Just craziness. And then you have Mongolia, North Korea, and China. And so look at that, we think, holy moly. When we look up here at this globe, that is a lot of pieces taken over by the communists. And there you go. They're coming in and taking over. This is how they were able to maintain control. Oops. Superpowers. In 1945 was the beginning of a long period of distrust and misunderstanding between the Soviet Union and the United States. I gotta fix it. Sorry. Both countries emerged as the world's two superpowers because they had the political strength and military power to influence countries around the world. So because of their military, they were able to get countries to listen to them, and that is why they are considered to be the superpowers of the party, or of the world at the time. Sorry, so let's put this back in present mode. Okay, so again, you should be pausing to fill in your blanks. Opposing views. The two countries had opposing views about the government and economics. The Soviet Union believed that a powerful central government should control the economy, as well as the government, which is communism. The US believed that businesses should be privately owned, which is capitalism. Disagreements between the two became a long period of tension and rivalry known as the Cold War. So this started slide 8 of your slotted notes. Cold War. The Cold War was a time of indirect conflict that lasted until 1991. Both countries worried that the other country would become more powerful and spread its economic and political views to other countries. This tension is called a Cold War because neither side ever fired a shot. However, many feared the rivalry between democracy and communism would lead to a nuclear war. The arms race. The United States and Soviet Union competed with one another for political influence and military power. Both countries built stockpiles of weapons, including nuclear bombs, in case the war turned physical. This buildup of weapons was called the arms race. And there you go. Weapons poised and ready to be shot at each other. Space race. During the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union also competed to have the most advanced science and technology. Both countries competed to be the first to put a man in space and to land on the moon. Distrust. Each side thought the other was trying to rule the world. Neither side would give up, and people lived in fear that another world war would erupt. This time, it could be a nuclear war, which could destroy the entire planet. All right, so we're starting with stopping the spread of communism. Alliances. The US and USSR had the ability to influence world events and project worldwide power. As the Cold War continued, more countries allied with each side. They formed alliances to protect themselves. There's your political cartoon again. It's saying don't use these because the enemy might retaliate. So we don't want to use them. We just want to keep them here and say we've got them if we need them. NATO. In 1949, Western European countries, Canada, and US formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Each nation in NATO believed the Soviet Union would not attack Western Europe if the United States would launch nuclear war in return. So Soviets aren't going to try to attack Western Europe because they knew that the United States would send nuclear missiles their way. All right, so here we have NATO, United States, Italy, Netherlands, France, United Kingdom, Iceland, Belgium, Norway, Luxembourg, Portugal, Canada, and Denmark. So these were all NATO countries right here. Germany. At the end of World War II, the Allies divided Germany into 4 sections to keep it from regaining power. US, Great Britain, France, and Soviet Union each controlled a section. In 1948, the Western Allies wanted to reunite Germany, but the Soviets disagreed. The Soviet section became East Germany, and the reunited sections became West Germany. Okay, so here's Berlin, and this is all Soviet zone. And then you can see up here, Hamburg, Hanover, Frankfurt. All of these up here were British. This was France, and this was American. And they put all of these together, and they said, you guys can have your country back. The Soviet Union said, not gonna happen. And so the Soviets kept them. And it was East Germany, and here's West Germany. All right, so this is where we stopped. So we're going to continue with it. So make sure you're paying attention. Berlin. During the Cold War, there were many hotspots or areas of extreme tension. The earliest hotspot was Berlin. The Soviets controlled the eastern part of Germany, and the Western countries controlled the western part of Germany. The capital, Berlin, deep within Soviet-controlled territory, was also divided into 4 occupation zones. So we have right here, this is Berlin. You can see it, it's the capital of the country. And so you can see over here we have West Berlin, and the Allied forces. France had up here, Britain had this light blue, and America had this bluish gray. And then Soviets had all of this. So you can see the red line outlines the West Berlin, even though Berlin was in Soviet country. Blockade. In June 1948, the Soviets blockaded all land and water traffic into western Berlin, hoping to make Britain, France, and America leave the city. Remember, Berlin was in East Germany, which the USSR occupied. So even though we controlled the west side of Berlin, it's in the middle of the USSR's, Soviet Union's East Berlin or East Germany, and so you had to go through Soviet East Germany to get into Western Berlin. So it was an obstacle. In response, the United States and Great Britain began an airlift. There it is. Airlift. What is an airlift? An airlift is a system of carrying supplies into Berlin by plane, day and night. British and American pilots flew in tons of food, fuel, and raw materials. How long did it last? 11 months. So you can see they would come in from western Western Germany, fly into Berlin, and they would fly back to Western Germany. And you can see they would come from 2 different spots and then fly back. Because again, you can see that Berlin is part of East Germany, way into East Germany, and so that was the only way they could get in there. And there's the flights. And there's some German children playing with airplanes because they were thankful that it was bringing food and supplies into them. Now what? The airlift is over. Now what? Germany officially becomes 2 countries with 2 governments. Bonn becomes the capital of West Germany. East Berlin becomes the capital of East Germany. West Berlin remains a democratic stronghold surrounded by communism. Post-World War II Korea. This should be starting slide 10. After World War II, Japanese-occupied Korea was temporarily divided into northern and southern parts. The Soviet Union controlled Korea north of the 38th parallel and established a communist government. The United States would be in charge of Korea south of the 38th parallel and promoted a democratic system. Korean War. In 1950, Kim Il-sung, the leader of North Korea, sent his powerful army into South Korea. South Korea was where the United States had to take a stand against communist aggression. U.S. President Harry Truman ordered American naval and air forces to support Korean ground troops and asked the United Nations to approve the use of force to stop the North Korean invasion. The United Nations responded quickly, imposing military sanctions. The U.S. and 19 other nations committed troops to the area. Despite initial heavy losses, the combined UN forces finally began to win. The situation changed when U.S. General Douglas MacArthur disobeyed orders to stay in South Korea. Okay, here's Kim Il-sung and Syngman Rhee. You can see here is the 38th parallel. And so down here is South Korea, and up here is North Korea. And this was in 1945. Here you can see what our border is now. So it looks like we gained a little bit of territory into South Korea. And this is still all North Korea. And it's a communist country. Korean War. Going beyond the 38th parallel into North Korea brought Communist China's well-trained and well-equipped army into the war. So because MacArthur decided he was going to take his army into North Korea, China decided they were going to help North Korea because they're communists. When the fighting finally ended in 1953, no one was truly victorious. The 38th parallel dividing line remained intact.
Good morning, faculty and staff. Happy Tuesday.
Okay, and here you can see pretty much the government protecting their area. So they're protecting the 38th parallel. Who won? South Korea remained free, so the containment had worked. North Korea didn't take over South Korea. Korea was badly damaged and many lives were lost. They are still 2 separate countries today. Reunification talks have begun, but progress is very, very slow. And that's because North Korea is a communist country that does not want, well, the government of North Korea does not want to be a democratic country like South Korea. Excuse me. All right, McCarthy and Khrushchev? I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Sorry. I probably should be able to pronounce that, but I can't. So, Joseph McCarthy. Many Americans worried that communism would take over the United States and dominate the world. Senator Joseph McCartney spearheaded a communist witch hunt fueled by these fears throughout the U.S. It was not a good time. His television appearances infected the nation with an anti-communist hysteria that ruined lives of many politicians, writers, and actors. So basically, he said, if you see anything suspicious, turn it in. So if you didn't like your neighbor, you could call and say, I think they're a communist, and they would come and get them. It wasn't a very pleasant time. Like, it took tattling to a whole new level. Khrushchev, maybe? Nikita Khrushchev was born in 1894 to a miner in the Ukraine. He served as the first secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1953 to 1964. He initiated the space program that launched Sputnik 1, and he had the idea of placing nuclear missiles in Cuba to restore the balance of power during the Cold War, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So Cuba is a communist country, and so the Soviet Union decided they were going to put nuclear warheads in Cuba, which is really close to the United States. And that's when the Cold War really got intense with the Cuban Missile Crisis. His goals were to overtake the United States in productivity and to help spread communism throughout the world. But he was overthrown in 1964. After 7 years of house arrest, he died in Moscow in 1971. About the capitalist states, it doesn't depend on you whether we, the Soviet Union, exist. If you don't like us, don't accept our invitations and don't invite us to come see you. Whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you. That's what he said in 1956. All right, I believe, check, but I believe that's as far. Nope, I gotta go all the way to truce. Okay. Let's keep going then. Sorry, guys. It's a long one. You know what? I'm gonna do this on a separate video so that you can take a break. All right, guys.